Good. So I put a couple of interactive polls just to get people's minds warmed up here. So you can either do it online or you can do it with text. This one is a text answer. So just kind of first things that pop into your mind. Feel free to write in here. What is mindfulness to you? And while we're doing that too, I'll keep the chat box open. If people want to ask questions, fire away. I tell people, if you want to ask a question of the whole group or you're okay with that, fire away. If it's something that's a little more personal to you, just send it to me directly. I won't share who's sending things, and we can talk about them. All right, some answers starting to trickle in here. There we go. Good. And the point of this exercise, as you're kind of seeing it here already, is mindfulness means different things to different people. And we're going to talk through some of the definitions and concepts of it, but you can see it certainly has a temporal sense to it of being in the moment or being aware, but it certainly also has kind of intentions to it and how we act and carry ourselves throughout the day. So thanks for your responses there. One more poll. Here we go. Right now, how many people believe they use mindfulness in their surgical practice, daily, weekly, monthly, or what the hell does mindfulness have to do with surgery? Oh, here we go. Good. So we've got a fair split of people who are mindful in their practices, and a fair amount of people who are skeptical about what mindfulness has to do with surgery. And I think that's a great place to start with. And so we'll kind of move forward from there. So, all right. So here is kind of the definition of mindfulness, right? And it is obviously associated with meditation, which comes from mindfulness meditation, but it really means being in moment-to-moment awareness. And this can do with thoughts or feelings or sensations and kind of what's surrounding you at the moment and where are you. So where does this tie into surgery? So we all want to enhance our efficiency, our productivity. We want to create more time. We all want more meaning from what we do. And at the same time, in today's current medical culture, we're combating burnout, stress, toxicities, et cetera. So I'll make the argument throughout the kind of talk today that being mindful and intentional as you approach your life, whether that's your career, surgery, family, can help you achieve the things you want to do. And a couple more quick ones here. So tell me about the classic surgeon. Put down some thoughts that come to mind here. And just as we're doing this, I'll tell you, I put plenty of slides together today. I will end with 10 minutes. If there's no discussion, we may get through all of them. If there's discussion and questions, we will not, and then we can always do something at another time. Here we go. There's some strong terms coming out. Confidence is a big part of it, but we see a lot of also some negative terminology here. God with a lowercase g. Right. And so confidence is the one that's come through with multiple people, but we certainly see some kind of negative connotations with being a surgeon or a plastic surgeon as well too. And so this is just kind of my take on the plastic surgeon. Now, obviously there's some demographic changes too, but typically this was a white man. And while the physical image has changed a little bit now, right, we have many more women, many more people of color in surgery. It is a revered and noble profession. I think that came through on our word cloud there. But this is often a field where poor behavior was acceptable, encouraged, or tolerated, right? How many times have you heard, oh, it doesn't matter, I just want the best surgeon. Doesn't matter if he or she is mean or has a terrible bedside manner. We just want somebody who's good in the operating room. And we've all seen lots of bad examples. And I would say to you that that is no longer the way we need to portray ourselves or be trained in the way we need to think about surgery. And so now tell me what you want in your ideal surgeon. And it's slightly contrasting, or hopefully contrasting. Right, and there's a tremendous there's a very stark contrast between our classic surgeon and our ideal surgeon, as people are being honest here. And I think that's really interesting. Compassionate, composed, humble. And here's my ideal surgeon in one context, right? These are the qualities of a monk: gracious, thoughtful, peaceful people with purpose, with self-control and calm. They are absolutely focused on service and the care of others and transcendence, or something greater than themselves. And if you get into a little bit of Buddhist philosophy, there's something called the paramitas, which are really the qualities of enlightened beings. And if you look at these characteristics, I think this is what a lot of us are striving for and what we want in our ideal surgeons, right? Generous, ethical people who are patient and honest, in incredible skill sets, but are still serene and calm and able to kind of manage stressful situations. And so as we move through today, I think one of the great lessons from Buddhism and from the Buddha is that you should not practice what you're being taught or what you're being told unless it works in your own life. So I'm going to say a lot, and I recognize that. And so I'm going to try and hit this from multiple angles, and hopefully one of the angles will resonate with you. They're not all necessarily meant to, and they may. But the idea is to kind of think about this from multiple angles and how we can improve your quality of life and who you are. And so a lot of the times in medicine and surgery, right, we're talking data, hypotheses, rationale, objective outcomes, objective data. It's going to be hard to give you a lot of objective data, particularly in this talk. I'll give it to you where it exists. But we're not measuring cancer-specific survival here. We're not measuring kind of a hard outcome. And so really, our outcome really is perception. And if we're making you think better and feel better about yourself and what you're doing, then we're achieving our goals. And I think that's one of the main objectives today. So like I said, I say this often with robotic surgery and other surgeries, right? You can't play the game unless you know what the pieces do. So the idea is just to provide some pieces today. And one of the first things to start thinking about is work-life balance. I hate this term in the sense of kind of as one goes up, the other has to go down. And it says that there needs to be, it implies that there are trade-offs as we work through our work-life balance. And there are lots of other terms you can work through, but I think it's much more complex than that, right? We have all of these dimensions of wellness and who we are. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over them, but we certainly are more complex than just work and life. And so there's not a lot of really good analogies, but as some of you know, I've gotten more into kind of yoga and balance. And I think this is the better way to think of balance now. It's a complex balance between multiple facets of who we are. It's not just a simple up and down, but how do you take multiple complex issues and put them together? And one of the ways that works for me, and I'm an old physics nerd here, is kind of thinking in the space of dimensions. And So one of the ways I work through this myself is I try to think about what are the dimensions, how can you not only work in your dimensions, but master them. And the classic dimensions are space and time. And if you kind of combine space and time, you can think about routines and habits and how we create and work through those. We're not going to talk about that today. Once again, that is a complex issue. It's not just X, Y, and Z and time, but it's probably a little bit more complex as some of our newer physics models show. But what we're going to talk about today is really self. And if you think about self, there's the physical self and there's the mental, emotional self. And you put those things together, it really can bring you to purpose. So the rest of the time, we're going to talk about self. And this really is the transcendental question of a lot of meditative and mindful practices. But it's not just meditation and mindfulness. It's who am I is the main question in existentialism and a lot of our philosophical movements. And it really is the eternal kind of human question. And I think being called a liberated being is a great term, but here's just a really nice quote. And it really kind of implies that we're all seeking to answer who we are. And that kind of process is, goes throughout our life. And it's really only as our life is coming, as we answer who we are, we're kind of destroying that concept. So you just kind of have to work through these things, and you will always be working through them for the remainder of your life. So I like word games a little bit too. And if you think about the derivations of health, healing, and holy, they all come from the original root word for whole. Similarly, integrity is often erroneously associated with morality, but it really is a sense of being whole or being undivided or being one. And we question our morality when we question our wholeness and who we are. So I like thinking of the concepts of whole and one as we kind of move through this. And the Dalai Lama also said the ultimate source of peace is in our mind, much more than our circumstances or who we are or where we are, but that how we kind of view ourselves can give us our happiness. So you can get your answer to mindfulness and who you are if you go to Las Vegas. The basic answer is there, right? Any casino you walk into Vegas says you must be present to win. And the answer to being mindful and figuring out who you are is to be present. And we're going to talk about what exactly that means. But Father Richard Rohr said, all spiritual teaching is about how to be present in the moment. Any religious philosophy, any philosophy in general, is teaching you how to be present. And so being present is both the challenge and the reward of trying to answer who you are. And it's not just a religious phenomenon. You can go all the way back to the kind of to mythology, right? Kronos was the Titan who was the prototype for, Father Time. And the Greeks had two senses of time. There was the chronos, or the sequential time, but there's also kairos, which was qualitative experience, what was happening between the moments. And then we see this a lot in sports, right? And nobody knows who Larry Gelvix is. He's a high school rugby coach, the winningest high school rugby coach in history. I don't think that matters much to anybody. But he's also a motivational speaker and talks about his philosophy that he taught his young men and women, which was how to win. And it's not just win, but it's WIN as an acronym, standing for what's important now. And it's okay to get beat. You get beat when you play a faster, stronger, or more talented team, but you lose when you lose focus and you lose the moment of presence. And if he taught his team and would instill in his players, don't focus on what happened 10 minutes ago or what we need to do at the end of the game. You focus on the moment and what needs to happen now. And that's how you're going to be the most effective player. And I think it's a really nice method. The other way we see it is in nature. And this was my dog who, as if 2020 wasn't hard enough, also my dog passed away right as the year was coming to a close. But you learn wonderful lessons from your pets and from your animals. And I would make an argument that there's no more present being than a dog. And some of our other pets. But when you walk in the house, they are fully focused on you. When it's time to eat, they are fully focused on their food. when it was at the beach and playing with a tennis ball, fully focused on being in that moment. And I think nature and animals provide us a great kind of metaphor for that. And there's a really nice quote about knowing your song. And birds don't really care or look to see what other birds are doing. They wake up in the morning and they sing. And this is the challenge for humans, is trying to figure out what is our song. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to develop presence and be in the moment? So the first thing we'll talk about is understanding our personality and our energy through understanding strengths and weaknesses. And then how do we develop a purpose? And a lot of times we can identify ourselves, or it's really not that we can identify ourselves, but it's hard to distinguish self without purpose or purpose without self. And so we'll provide some frameworks to help you do that. Not going to talk about mentoring and coaching today. There's just not enough time, but certainly mentors and coaches are there to help you along the way, and you should seek out those people. So we're going to get right into personality. Classically in kind of personality teaching, there are 5 personality traits: openness versus experience, conscientiousness, introversion and extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And there are some biological foundations for this. There are some genetics and biologies that you'll see. A lot of it is also the way we are raised and the environmental exposures. And important to remember, biology does not necessarily determine destiny in our in many traits, but also in personality. And I think it's also important to recognize that a lot of us have different personality. We may have a kind of a life personality. We may have an operative or surgical personality, which also reflects the way in which we're trained. And I would argue to you that you should try and align them. It is much easier to kind of hold on to one personality and one sense of self than to be different people in different contexts of your life, but we can kind of work through that. So how do you understand your personality? Pretty easy to understand the introvert extrovert. It's kind of where you gain your energy, but there are a number of personality tests that are available to you online or through kind of leadership programs or development programs. I'll show you kind of 2 of mine just to kind of give you examples. This is the Myers-Briggs Test. This is kind of one of the classic ones done that breaks you down by introversion, extroversion, et cetera. And you see here, I am what's called an ENTP. I'm an extrovert, intuitive. I am a feeling person and a perceiving person, which means, which I think describes me fairly well: inventive, enthusiastic, strategic, enterprising, et cetera. But also each personality has its strengths and also has its weaknesses. And the weakness of an ENTP is that you move quickly from one task sometimes to another. You're excited by the new challenge. And so for me, I know I need to really focus on taking projects to completion and not moving on to the next one. This is another personality test. This is the Enneagram, which is available online for free. So I'm a pretty even split between a type 1 perfectionist and type 2 challenger. And you'll see kind of the breakdowns and once again, strengths and weaknesses to each of these. And it's just important to understand kind of where you map out. And I'll make the argument that a lot of our personality is not really changeable. This is kind of who we are. You can tweak it a little bit, you can modify, you can work towards your strengths and weaknesses, but you're not going to be really successful at changing your personality. And so how do we get the most out of that? And so here's one of the concepts. This is the 4 Varnas of Hinduism. And obviously this is the basis for the caste system, which is less than ideal, we'll put it that way. But the major concept here is that society cannot exist without all types of people, and that people complement each other. You need priests and warriors and merchants and skilled workers and unskilled workers. And I think the really important thing, and the Varnas in 2021, are that we're all equal. Each role is just as important as the other one, and we need each other to be successful. So find, where do you fit in? What's your personality type? Who are you? And how do you complement yourself with others? So the other concept of kind of personality and developing self is understanding your energy. And I'll tell you, energy is highly variable and something we do have a lot of control over. And so here's another of my favorite kind of physics metaphors. So you think of the evolution of physics, and it starts with Newtonian physics, where the world's made of matter, right? Each reaction is met with an equal and opposite reaction, and the kind of social metaphors that each person's separate from others. In the kind of relativity world, energy and matter are now intertwined, right? We're not necessarily what we appear to be. And in the most recent iterations in string theory, everything is energy. It vibrates and it moves, it oscillates. And we have internal forces and external forces that act on each other that determine our energy. And this is an actually kind of a complex model of energy, but I'll simplify it the best I can. And it's put forth by a PhD psychologist named Bruce Schneider, and it's called energetic self-perception. You don't need to know the details of it, but the concept is low levels of energy, or put it this way, everyone has different energy levels, and we vibrate or resonate and can move throughout our energy levels. Low levels of energy, what he calls energy levels 1 and 2, in general are negative. They're associated with conflict or anger, defiance. And as we move up the energy chain, we become more aware, we become more present, and we have more energy available to us. And we are never stable, and we can exist in multiple energy states in multiple facets of our life. So we may be at high energy levels in the operating room. We may be at really low energy levels in clinic. We may be somewhere in the middle in our personal lives, and trying to align those things and being aware of our energy levels is important. And this model is very complex, but a breakdown, the simple and I think most important thing is that you want to move away from negative energy levels into the positive. And the high levels, 6 and 7, are like monk level, transcendental energy levels. And you don't need to be there, but you should try and work out of the 1 and 2. And you can see these are just some of the descriptions of leadership and organizations that are in kind of level 2 negative energy versus positive energy. And the simplest way to break this down is catabolism and anabolism. Catabolic energy is low negative energy, and it breaks down organizations and people, where anabolic leaders are inspirational and motivators. They're focused on improving others and improving the energy around them. And because they have higher energy, they have more energy available to them to do it. So while personality is a little bit fixed, energy is totally available to us, and we should be thinking about these things. And Jack Welch was the former CEO of GE. He's quoted famously for saying, you want to improve your workforce, get rid of the lowest 10% every year, and in a few years, you're going to have a better workforce. Now, that's not a great way to make friends, but he also came up with this kind of table here, which models out performance and values, or ethics. And we all want to be high performing, high energy, or high value people. These are competent and outstanding people. These are people you promote in your practice, in your field, wherever you are. And it's really easy to get rid of the incompetent a-holes, right? They perform poorly and they're jerks. So we want to get rid of them. But the challenge becomes when there's incongruence. And you can often see people who are high performers, but behave badly or don't align their energy well. And these are actually the challenging ones, because it's really hard to remediate them. And in my opinion, this is often a personality issue more than it is an energy issue. And we don't have a lot of leeway with them. And so in this area, you got to decide, is that a net positive person or a net negative person? But where there's real opportunities are in the really good people who aren't performing well, because you can improve their performance. You can coach them, you can bring them on. Now, I just described this in the third person, but we all fit in here somewhere as a first person, as who we are. And you can think about in this model, if you're a high performer but not behaving well, how do you get yourself to behave better? If you're not performing as well as you can, you should be seeking out coaches and mentors to help you get there. So how do we change? How do we build our identity? Well, I think one of the nicest ways to think about this is we have to set our identity with our behaviors. And you don't want to be the kind of person who wants something. You want to be the kind of person who is something. And Atomic Habits is a really good book that kind of goes over building identity. But one of the examples he gives there is, if you want to lose weight, you could either want to lose weight, or you could be a healthier, skinnier person. And it's much easier to enact the behaviors if you own that identity. And there's actually neuropsychological science behind this, that we can transition from kind of our frontal neocortex thinking about things to making things more innate if we internalize them and make that part of our identity. And I think one of the other really big concepts is that small changes can make big differences by reinforcing an identity. How often do you hear people say, we're suffering death by 1,000 cuts, right? We often think about getting worse in these small increments, but you can also get better in very small increments. And if you think about that, think about those small changes and reinforcing your identity, you can get better. Institutions and individuals support each other, right? It defines our identity. And there's some science here. Obese people are more likely to have obese friends who lose weight. If you have a friend who loses weight, you are more likely to lose weight. There's data that say that your best friend's IQ when you're in your early teens actually is associated with your IQ later in life. So the people and the groups we surround ourselves help create our identity, and vice versa. So we can build better habits by being in a culture where the behavior we want is the norm. And we've all kind of self-selected into medicine, right? We're altruistic people. We want to help others. We want to be better at what we do. And so by working, by kind of crafting that norm, those good behaviors, we can enhance our own behavior, and vice versa. By behaving the way we want to behave, we can help craft the culture or the tribe that we're in. And once you feel comfortable in your group, then you can look for ways to stand out. So how do we understand personality and identity? So first, understand your strengths and weaknesses. Seek out those who contrast and enhance who you are. And then lastly, craft your personality and energy to fit a productive work-life model. So first part of this was personality and energy. Now we're going to get a little more into self and values. So go ahead, share some of your core values. Who are you? Kind of feel like humble should be written smaller, right? These are great, right? This is the core of who we are. This is who we want to be. And for every person, this is different. And the list of core values or ideals is long. And there's actually a fair amount of science behind this now. And if you're interested in kind of neuroscience and how behaviors can actually change your brain and who you are, I recommend Altered Traits. Really good book, chock full of science and experiments. But one of the core thoughts of this book is that you can create your life mission, particularly through mindfulness. And by reinforcing these behaviors, you actually create what they call altered traits, permanent changes to your brain and who you are. And it's actually on the genetic level, you can actually create better behaviors, and you can actually pass these genes on through a variety of kind of genetic modifications, to be honest with you. But there's a couple of principles that you need to be aware of. This is called the growth equation. Stress plus rest equals growth, right? It's relatively simple, but the technical term is actually called periodization. It comes from exercise science, right? We're all very familiar with this if you've been to the gym, right? And the easiest way to think about this is if you want to get bigger biceps, isolate that capability, work on your arms, provide the stress, add weight, rest and recover, do it again, and you're going to get stronger biceps. But this is actually analogous in almost every physiological state we have. You want to get better lung capacity, work on your lung capacity. And it also works in your emotional and mental self. You want to be a more kind person, work on kindness through mindfulness. You want to be a more patient person, you can work on patience, and it will change who you are. You need to provide stress, provide rest, and then repeat the process. And the actual neuroscience here is kind of a shift from system 2 to system 1 learning. System 2 learning is thoughtful and analytical, effortful mental activities, where system 1 is that quick automatic thinking that we have. And any of you who have young kids or seen them, right? This is how kids learn to walk. You can see their first few steps are really intentional and slow. And then the next thing you know, within a few months, they're running quickly around the house. We experience the same things in the operating room. We experience the same things in the way we manage patients, and we learn disease states. And the concept that takes you from system 2 to system 1 is actually myelination. And that happens with repeated behaviors. And the myelin generation actually occurs most of the time at night when we are asleep. So important to kind of understand that. And then there's the concept of doing and learning. You can learn by watching and learning, but you really need to do, and I think this has significant implications for surgery, right? You have to make the neurons fire, and they fire more when we're actually doing things. And it's not just how long it takes you to do things, but it's the repetition that's really important. So the more we repeat a task, the more automatic it becomes. And that's founded really in neuroscience. And we see this in the article we went over last week in Journal Club. I'm not going to spend any time on the 10,000 hour rule. We went over it last week in depth, but this is what we see. And so the next part of seeing and doing and creating the behaviors is crafting the behaviors to who we want to be. And there's this concept called Dharma. And you might not all buy into this, but Dharma is where passion, expertise, and usefulness with compassion meet a purpose. This is not just a goal or an objective, but it's where all of these things come together, and it's built through competence, skills, and character, kind of who we are. And we are by kind of default, being in medicine, we are drawn to Dharma. These are doctors, right? Passionate, skillful, compassionate people who are providing a useful skill to society and to people. But the trick with Dharma is it involves compassion, and you can't, just because you're skilled and just because you're good, you can't be a jerk, right? To truly achieve Dharma and to achieve your purpose, you need to be thoughtful and kind at what you're doing. So once again, another 2x2 square, thinking about your skill set and your passions, what you love. When you have skill and passion, this is where you want to play hard, right? You'll get depth, meaning, and satisfaction. This is where you're going to achieve your Dharma, where you have both skills and passions. Where you have no skills and no passion, find other people who enjoy doing these things. This is kind of gets back to knowing your personality, right? And the key here is don't belittle people or put them down because they do things you don't like doing. Honor them because they're doing the stuff that you are not good at or that you don't want to do. Where you have skills but no passion, this is where you can try and focus some energy and try and bring more passion to that to enhance kind of who you are and what you're doing. And where you have no skills but a lot of passion, these are your hobbies. This is why I play basketball on the weekends. I have no skills, but I love doing it and I love being with my friends. And I think we have a lot of passions, but enjoy those things and recognize where we have skill and passion and help be intentional in those movements. This is not just in kind of the mindfulness practices. Aristotle talked about this, theoretical, practical, and poetical work, where you can kind of bring forth things other than yourself. Steve Nakata writes about this in his kind of academic primer for career success, where you start with performance, you move to purpose, and you develop passion. And so how do we find that passion? How do we find our Dharma? So first, identify your values, right? So how do you, the way I put this is, how do you want to be remembered? So I believe in heaven. I'm Catholic. That's the way I was raised, and those are the things I believe in. But you don't necessarily need to believe in heaven or an afterlife to understand that one of the ways we definitely can pass on or live on beyond this life is by the interactions and memories we give others. So identify your values. How do you want people to remember you is often a great way to identify those values. Put those values in the context of your life, right? Our values should be similar at work and with our family, but we may have slightly different order to those values in our research career or in our business career than we do with our family life. This is a key point. Identify your priority. By definition, you can only have one priority. There can really only be one thing that is most important to you. You can prioritize everything else underneath that. And one of the ways to think about that is, after your priority, where do you want to be confident? What are the things you want to do well in? You can set short-term and long-term goals and focus on just achieving little steps. Create a mission statement. I'll share you my mission statement in a second. And you want to revisit that mission statement because it's going to change. And you can, and by doing all of this, you will cultivate or work on your passions, your values, and your Dharma. So this is my current mission statement. And it's relatively short, but it's loaded with a lot in here, right? First, be the best father and husband I can be. And I want to make lasting improvements to the management of urologic cancers, specifically kidney and testicular cancer. Now, loaded within that, there's the order things are written in. There is, while it doesn't specifically say training of residents and fellows, that is implicit to the lasting improvements in my mind, right? So there's ways to kind of craft your mission, and this changes. Now, I also have short and long-term goals, which I encourage all of my mentees to put down on paper, and those change all of the time. That can be writing papers, getting grants, moving through successes. And one of the ways, one of the nice frameworks to think about how you can move through or develop your sense of self and purpose is understanding what you need to do first. So this is the hierarchy of needs. And basically the punchline here is you need to meet a whole bunch of kind of physiologic needs before you can actually get to purpose and who you are. You need to eat, sleep, and be safe. You need to have relationships with people. You need to feel important before you can actually start working on who you are. And the order of these needs is different for everybody. And you can't get to self-actualization or transcendence until you work on the things underneath. And I think the two practical points I always like to bring up with Maslow is, one, this was the reason why breakfast and lunch came into schools, particularly in the inner cities, because kids couldn't focus on learning and education if they weren't fed and safe. And the other practical one I would give to you is, next time you're having trouble sleeping at night, think about everything underneath kind of purpose, right? Are you fed? Are you comfortable? Are you safe? What's going on in your life? And just, you may not be able to address the issues in the middle of the night, but by recognizing the issues, it can help you get on to kind of what you need in the moment. And in the moment, your purpose may be sleep. And these things change, right? Day to day, we make changes, month to month. So every few years, we should become a new person. We should be working to evolve and become something different than we were a year or two ago. And so Maslow actually came up with this theory by studying successful people. And there's a couple of problems with these pictures. There's a lot of older white men. There's a couple of women mixed in. But there are certain characteristics of these self-actualizers, and I'm not going to run through all of them. You can see them here. And if you think about mindful practices, there's also this concept of the monkey mind versus the monk mind. And I'll point you down just towards some of the bottom ones, where the monkey mind is focused on short terms, changes on a whim, does what feels good, temporary fixes. The monk mind is focused on long-term gains, goals, vision, mastery, meaning, and genuine solutions rather than quick fixes. And so how do we get to self-actualization? Well, one of the first things is use a beginner's mind. Experience life like a child. Try and take everything in with a lot of absorption and concentration. Try new things. Don't stick to the same paths. Listen to yourself. Listen to others instead of just dogma or authority. Don't play games. Be honest with yourself and with others. Be prepared to be unpopular, specifically if they don't coincide with the majority in terms of ethics or values. take responsibility, work hard, and identify your own defenses, your own personality issues, and have the courage to give them up. And this is not only the success to self-actualize or develop purpose, but this is, I think, a really good kind of model for how to have a successful career in academic medicine, right? If you look at all of these things. So there are positive ways to do this, and you can look at people like Michael Jordan and some really good sports analogies. Focus on what you're really good at, bring the best in others. The other way to think about this is focus on your weaknesses. So Steve Nakata is a huge golfer, and he brought about this example in his book. When Tiger did the Tiger Slam in 2000, he won 4 consecutive major championships, and he was coming into St. Andrews, I believe was the 4th one. And tough sand traps. He's not a good sand player. So he could either, in the months leading up to it, work on his sand game, or he focused intently on avoiding sand traps and knowing the course and knowing how to play to his strengths. And he won with a healthy margin. So know your strengths, know your weaknesses. As we're getting kind of towards the end here, I'm going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes, but this is not easy. This is hard work. Nobody else is going to do this for you. So it's your responsibility to cultivate and defend your Dharma. You have to build both competence and character. And what I mean by that is competence are the things we're good at, and character is all the stuff we hate doing. These are chores. These are mindless activities. This is epic notes and calling patients occasionally. And if you're just competent without doing anything character building, you're a little narcissistic. And if you're just doing character building work without thinking about how you can be competent, you don't really have purpose. So take ownership and embrace the character building parts of your life. If it's truly mindless, let your mind wander, think about other things, use that time and space to free your mind to think about the things that are important to you. And then purpose your purpose. Make time to read and process. I think Dr. Walsh gave us the greatest example of this. Every August, he got out of the operating room. He got away from clinical medicine, and he reflected on what he was doing to be better in the next year. There's a concept of micro and macro breaks, which I'm not going to get into, but you can use visual cues, self-talk, daily and nightly reflection to help build behaviors towards this. Personally, every night I write down 3 things before I go to bed, something I'm grateful for the day. I write down the 2 or 3 things, only 2 or 3 things that have to be done the next day. And I write down things that were important to me that happened during the day and give me a chance to reflect. And so if you don't believe in Dharma, that's okay. There's some scientific rationale. There's some psychological constructs we went over. There are a number of other psychological constructs that I'm really not going to go over, but basically just says the more we challenge ourselves and push ourselves mentally, we can improve our behavior and outcomes. And there certainly are some pitfalls. And I'm just going to go through 3 quick pitfalls, and then we'll sum up here. So pitfall number 1 is failing to intentionally choose what we do. So if you don't think about who you want to be and what you want to do, others are going to focus your energy for you. And you may not be able to choose what options you have, but you can always decide how to choose among those options. And you should be thinking about how you want to direct your energy. You could get much further in one direction than you can in multiple. Another pitfall, we see this a lot in academic medicine. This is the paradox of success. Early on, you have clarity of purpose, you know who you want to be, and you achieve success. Now you're a go-getter. And so you get a lot of opportunities and you say yes, because that's who you are. And now all of a sudden, 3-4 years later, you have diffused efforts, you're spread thinner and thinner, and you're actually not contributing what you initially set out to do. So we need to get rid of the meaningless, give people time, space to be time and productive. Think about what email chains are really important. Think about what projects are really important. Do you need to be in every meeting that's on your schedule? And you see this at the individual level, company, institution, societal levels. The undisciplined pursuit of more actually leads to kind of stagnation. So Nurmish and Meredith hated this analogy, so I'm going to skip the solar flare analogy. I'm going to try a different one today. So when you think about your academic career and productivity, these are kidney cancer, phylogeny genetics. You can think about how you want to progress. And I think maybe something like this, where you initially start out in kind of a wide breadth of topics or values, and you progress towards the more specific and the more in-depth that not only defines who you are as a person, but who you are academically and medically and such. And then the last big pitfall is mixing our context and values. So I'm going to wrap up in the next minute, like I said I did. But the easiest one to understand this is there are social and market norms. Social norms are how we interact with each other on kind of a daily basis, and market norms are basically economics. And we see this a lot in medicine right now where, I mean, listen, we all hear the rumors of clinic changes and OR block changes, and the economics are now mixing with the social norms where we are no longer able to behave in altruistic fashions because money is becoming the biggest driver here. And so we have to be protective of those social norms and who we are. So lastly, we can focus our intention and improve our performance by focus on things other than ourselves. And where you see this a lot in sports, but you can see this in your everyday life. This was Meb Klefesky, who was not a very good marathon runner prior to the 2014 Boston Marathon, but this was the year after the bombing, and he said the victims helped carry him through, and he was the clear winner that year. So we can use outside forces to help us. If you have not read this book, this is phenomenal. Viktor Frankel was a Holocaust survivor. The first half of the book is his experience in a concentration camp, and the second is his philosophy on meaning. And he basically, it's a evolution from Freud, where Freud believed a lot of our struggles came from kind of sexual frustrations. His belief was that our struggles come from identity struggles. And so if we can work towards who we are and what we are and focus on sacrifice and making contributions, that's how we can make a real contribution and better. So I'll summarize here. A sense of self is a powerful force leading to really great happiness or struggle. Being present is the key and the reward for determining who you are. Knowing your personality and energy will give you the foundation for self. You should complement your personality because it's not that changeable, but you certainly can move your energies. And then self can be defined through purpose or your Dharma, if you like that construct. Cultivate your Dharma, cultivate your purposes, and be intentional on how you evolve. So what do you want to do with your precious life? If anybody has any questions or comments, otherwise, well, let's see if we can, I was going to redo this question, but we'll skip it there. So I'll stop to share. If anybody has any comments or questions, I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Thank you, Phil, for that. That was wonderful. Just a couple of comments that, this is obviously something that's becoming much more prevalent, not just in our own department, right, but everywhere. Kind of this awareness that, who we are as surgeons doesn't necessarily look like what the ideal surgeon was in the past. And just a real-time reference, I'm currently interviewing for fellowships, and these questions have been coming up a lot in interviews about what it means to be a surgeon, what it means to be a leader, how I would define who I am. So if there's no other motivation to kind of ask these questions, other than it can potentially help you in job searches in the future, it's a good reason to do it. And just one other point of, I agree that our personality, there's something stagnant to it, but it also is a little bit more fluid than I think we give enough credit to. And if nothing else, just being aware of the way that our brains tend to think and the way that our bodies tend to feel, being aware of that and being able to take a pause and sometimes change the way that we act in the OR, at work, in life. That's, I think, where a lot of great change can come from the actions that we put out into the world. Sometimes we can't change what our first reaction is or how we feel about things, but that's where a lot of big change can occur and a lot of positive change. So thank you for this. This was a very much needed talk.
Thanks, Kelly. Really great comments there. And I think you're right. I mean, we all cultivate who we are, but also who the others are around us. And it doesn't matter if we're on the top of the pyramid or the bottom of the pyramid or somewhere in the middle. We're all part of this together, and we can build a better community together. And I think that's a great point you bring up.
Phil, it's Trinity. So thanks for doing this. We asked you to pinch hit when the faculty meeting was canceled, and this is what you came together with the guidance of the residents. So I think the residents have to take credit a little bit for this talk because it inspired you to do it. And I actually I loved it. I think my experience, from I think I think probably Katie put in that that a butcher is the traditional surgeon, and how it has now changed over time. I think we as surgeons have to recognize that you may have personalities that are that of the traditional surgeon, and maybe personalities or traits that aren't necessarily ideal to help foster an environment in the OR or for training that is good for everyone. And to make the changes, it's not something that you can change overnight. It's going to take you from reflecting on who you are, and what your strengths and weaknesses are, and it will take you years to ultimately become a better version of yourself. I think ultimately you never lose your identity and who you are, but you can absolutely morph into a better individual. And I guess my only point here is that I think we all should be looking at these characteristics of ourselves and considering how to get better. But it doesn't happen overnight. It will take many years to do that. So thank you for spending the time and giving us a phenomenal lecture.
Yeah, Trinity, just to kind of, it was kind of implicit to the talk. I didn't make it explicit, but I mean, right, that's the steps, right? First, you have to know who you are, recognize it, and you can make those little micro changes over time. And if anybody wants to see, there's actually a ton of science behind that, how that happens. But you're right, it takes time. And the only way to speed it up is through being intentional and thinking about it on a daily basis. The more repetitions, the more you do, is the only way to make that process go faster. So great points.